My name is Roman Sulzhik, and I'm actually from Kiev. And and I'll talk about this in the end a little bit, about my vision about how these blockchain technologies will be adopted and how they will change the financial system. But first, Pasha, like one of the organizers, he said, Roman, just tell them a little bit about yourself, tell them your story. It's maybe interesting to people. So I actually come from a programming background, like most of the people here. And when I came to America in the 90s, I was a mathematician as well. I was second in Ukraine in mathematics at one point. And I came there, and yeah, I got a job as a programmer. I was able to stay there, get a green card. But I didn't understand anything about the financial system. I would watch on the television how Greenspan would say, I raised rates from 5% to 5.25. And I was like, what does he mean? Why am I paying 13% on my credit cards? Where does this 8% go? And to me, that's been pretty much a driving story for the rest of my life, is understanding how the world financial system works. And I got an MBA from New York University in economics and finance, and I managed to become a trader at JP Morgan, basically at 2008, when the world was blowing up around us. I was at the trading desk where we held 1/3 of the world derivatives. And it was a very sort of humbling experience, because I must tell you honestly, we did not intend to blow up the world. Like, the guys like me, like who were there, like most of the guys, they just said, this is your job, and our job was really like building wooden rockets and flying into space on bottles of gunpowder. We did not, we did not want to create this subprime crisis. We did not want to do this. It was really sort of, we just started going in some direction, and the repercussions of what happened, it was, even our bosses didn't see it. I had a conversation with the bosses about 6 months before everything blew up, and I floated a suggestion that there may be a blow up and it may come from credit. And they just told me, look, just shut up and go back to your day job. Like, this is, not something you have to worry about. But anyway, since then, we know what happened. The world has changed. So basically, the regulators, they came in, they completely, shut down a lot of these industries, a lot of these businesses that were happening. I think the world became a little safer, but still some of the institutions that they've created, like central counterparty and putting the risk into these central counterparties, this is going to be the source of the next blow up. Like basically in 10, 20 years, when there's a big financial crisis, is going to come from these central counterparties, because people are going to put too much risk into them, and they will again misjudge the risk, and this is where the next blow up will happen. But I think we have another 10, 20 years until then. But if we're talking about trends, and I am seeing a absolutely massive trend right now of disintermediating the traditional banking. And the traditional banking industry, it built so many protections around it. Like, for example, I now have an investment firm in Cyprus. So I can actually open a broker account, I can open accounts, money accounts for people, but I cannot do FX, I cannot do foreign exchange. If somebody comes to me and says, here's 10,000 euros, change it to me into dollars, to me, it actually costs zero to do it, because I can access the interbank market, I can do it at zero spread, and I can get the euros as like zero spread. And technically, I could offer this service to the people. But this is, the current regulation says only banks are allowed to do this. Like for a client, I as an investment firm cannot do this, because banks make massive fees on foreign exchange. And the amount of money they make every time you swipe a credit card, like if you press the wrong button, they make 5%. It's absolutely crazy, because the interbank rate is zero. And I was in San Francisco, and I spoke to PayPal guys, like very senior executives at PayPal. I was talking to them about potentially coming to Ukraine. And I said, guys, why don't you, take this FX market, and why don't you just destroy it? Why don't you like offer really like FX rates at zero? Then everybody will be using PayPal, everybody will be doing FX through you. And he said, but there's so much fees. Like, we're making billions of dollars out of the FX rate. So basically, MasterCard and Visa set this really wide FX margins. And PayPal, instead of undercutting them, it subscribed to them, and it joined the cabal and it's also not offering the consumers a good FX rate. And what I think is happening right now, and this is where blockchain and the payment services I think can really help, is disintermediation of the banks, and it will start with the FX rate. Maybe there's still, sorry guys, because if you look at it, sorry, just something in my throat. So anyway, if you look at it, like companies like Revolut, I am just absolutely shocked. Like the guys, actually Russian emigres, an ex-banker, raised a little money. They only raised a few $1 million. Like they basically created they got a payment license, they got a e-wallet license. These licenses cost nothing in Europe. They basically cost something like you have to have 300,000 euros on your bank account and maybe 100,000 euros running to maintain this license. And these guys created, and I downloaded it on my phone. You can just go in, download the app. It gives you an account to which you can transfer money, like 1,000 euros, 10,000 euros. You transfer the money, and then they give you a credit card. And if you go and pay in a cash machine anywhere in the world, they actually give you a normal FX rate. So instead of charging you 25%, they just charge 0.25%. In 2 years, with zero advertising, these guys have 600,000 users, and their valuation right now, they just got $15 million in financing. I don't know at what valuation. I mean, probably in the hundreds of millions already. And you know, this continuation of what I said earlier when I was at the panel, I think that this Payment Services Directive 2, you know, the very big push by European regulators to disintermediate the banking industry and allow small entrants to offer services to consumers better and cheaper. This is a huge opportunity, and I think that a lot of people in this room, you know, if you're focusing on how to enter into the financial services industry, this is the area where I suggest you would focus in terms of trying to reach out to European partners and trying to find what software do they need to build these payment institutions and what software do they need to install in banks to work with these payment institutions. Because the current PSD2 that will come in effect in January next year, it says that every time a customer of a payment institution comes to the payment institution, the bank of that customer has to give the payment institution access to the bank account. So if right now only Visa and MasterCard can have access to the bank account and they can debit the money, they can transfer the money, any payment institution will be able to go to a bank through an API and be able to block the funds and to transfer the funds. And to me, I mean, I see, for example, like the business idea that is on the surface, and I mean, I'm hoping to implement it, but maybe, you know, somebody will be here quicker, is once this comes out, you register a payment institution and you just create a peer-to-peer Forex exchange in Europe. So if somebody wants to trade 1,000 euros for dollars, you place an offer at the exchange, say, I'm offering my 1,000 euros for sale. And you don't need to transfer the money to anybody. The payment institution just goes in, blocks the 1,000 euros on your account. And while the order is there, the 1,000 euros is blocked. And then if somebody comes in with like $900 and say, oh, I'm paying this $900 for this, or whatever, $1,660 for, you know, for these euros, if the guy's money is also blocked. And if these orders match, then immediately the money gets transferred and they go, one guy gets euros, another guy gets dollars. I'm just saying that these are the sort of applications that will become possible. And I see that, for example, the broking industry, like the whole industry of brokers, where right now, if you want to trade Apple, you have to transfer your money to the broker, and then broker places an order on your behalf at the exchange. Because apparently the broker has to check your credit quality and do all of these things. But I'm seeing, like for example, when you trade Bitcoin, you don't need a broker. You just take Bitcoins from your wallet, place them on the exchange, and then you know, the exchange does the trade and sends you the dollars in the, you know, back. And I'm seeing right now that in MiFID II, in European regulation, they actually are having trouble finding a place for brokers. Like they're still creating like all this receiving and transmission of orders, whatever. But I think deep in their mind, the regulators understand that the brokers are not really necessary. If you have one place where you hold your assets and you hold your money, it's like this electronic wallet where you currently hold Bitcoins. If you have that one place, you can just go to a peer-to-peer exchange and say, I'm placing my Apple stock for sale, or I'm placing my Bitcoins for sale, or I'm placing my euros for sale and I want to get dollars. And that asset that you're selling will be placed on hold by the exchange in your wallet. So you cannot give it to anybody else while you have this order on the exchange. And then if the order executes, the asset immediately leaves your wallet and then comes back, you get whatever money or other asset that you bought. And if you think about it, I mean, these sort of possibilities were pretty much impossible, as Georgi said earlier, if this was a paper-based economy. If this sort of infrastructure is recorded in a distributed ledger where you can verify that you've done this transaction and authorities will be able to trace where the assets came from and actually trace in the distributed ledger the path of every asset, I think they will be very receptive to this. Like I see that this is, for example, I wanted to talk about how I see the financial industry will change over the next 5 years. I see that this immediate availability of assets for trade is one of the main things. The second thing, and I actually wrote an article about it recently, just trying to get it published, is building of trust, like trust in the digital world. Because right now, the way institutions build trust with their investors is the same way they build trust for 200 years. Because there was a guy from PwC speaking earlier, they're accountants. Where did the accountants come from? They came from the need for owners to control their assets in America. Like, so the owners were in Britain and they had a plantation in America. And they didn't have the time to go to America and check how their plantation was doing. So they hired this institute of chartered accountants. And there was a guy who went to the plantation and calculated how many black guys were working in the fields, like how many, like cotton, like how much they had, like all of these things. And they reported back to Britain, basically, this is really like your plantation, this is what you have. And what we're doing right now is pretty much the same thing. Quarterly financial reports. Once a quarter, the executives go out and talk to the analysts and say, this is what we have in our company, these are the assets. I see that for small companies in future world, why cannot the company completely open up its accounts? If you want to raise right now, for example, $100,000 and build a little bakery, why can you not say, I'm spreading this $100,000 through digital tokens on blockchain, I have a distributed ledger where all the owners' records are immediately available. And if you want to get, for example, a vote from your voters, like to buy a new facility or to sell your existing facility from your shareholders, they just get a pop-up on their iPhone and they press yes or no, do they agree with you or not? And this way they, as shareholders, can exercise their rights. You can, for example, use the same mechanism to send these guys every day your bank statement and the amount of income and whatever expenses you had that day. And when I actually told this idea to a friend of mine, he said, look, Roman, but people are already doing that. And he showed me an application in America where charity organizations actually implement this level of transparency. If you donate to a charity, you get an application where you can watch in real time the bank account of this charity, and you can see all the payments that the charity makes and all the money that it receives. And it's doing, like the charities are doing absolute transparency. And what I'm basically thinking right now, that these sort of blockchain distributed ledgers will allow people to create a new paradigm of trust in the digital world. Like one guy, to raise the money through coins, will do this. Like he will open up his bank account to his investors. Another guy will say, look, I'm not ready to open up my bank account. I will install a webcam in my bakery, and everybody who's my shareholder can go on their app and watch this cam live. So ordinary people cannot see it, but you have to buy a share in order to see the app, to see what's going on in the bakery. Other people will do other things. And what I'm trying to push also through the regulators right now is to say, look, let these let these different methods of trust in the digital world, let them evolve. Don't try to regulate it straight away. Let the guys create their own ways in which they will build trust with their shareholders, with their debt holders. And after a while, like obviously there's going to be booms and busts, but after a while you will determine what are what works, what doesn't work, and then you start to regulate and set a certain minimal level of what is the regulation in the digital world. Anyway, I think that I've sort of bored you enough. I don't know. This is just some of my thoughts about how these technologies may become applicable, as we're moving forward. And I want to say again, like, thank you, everybody. Спасибо всем за то, что пришли сюда. Вообще, это просто приятно видеть такое огромное количество людей, и очень радует. Поэтому давайте боритесь и поборите.